With that idea in mind that some of these phrases carry real emotional weight, let's look at one that leans heavily negative: talk down to. This describes a way of speaking to someone that makes them feel small, as though they lack intelligence or don't deserve to be taken seriously. It's condescension, plain and simple. You'll hear it in sentences like, "He talks down to everyone as if they were children," painting a picture of someone who never treats others as equals. Or consider, "She felt insulted when her boss talked down to her," which captures exactly the sting this kind of speech causes. Nobody enjoys being on the receiving end of this, and knowing the phrase gives you a precise way to call it out when it happens. Let's move to something far more neutral and frankly essential in any conversation: bring up. This simply means introducing a new topic, mentioning something that wasn't part of the discussion before, or adding a fresh point, fact, or opinion into the mix. It's one of the most common phrases you'll use in daily English, whether in casual chats or formal meetings. For instance, "She brought up an interesting point during the discussion," describes someone contributing something worth considering. On the other hand, you might say, "I didn't want to bring up that subject again," showing reluctance to revisit a topic, maybe because it's sensitive. Maybe because it's already been discussed to death. Either way, this phrase is about initiating conversation, not disrupting it. Now here's one that captures a very human reaction: clam up. This describes the moment someone suddenly goes silent, usually out of nervousness or shyness, right when they're expected to speak. Think about presentations, job interviews, or unexpected questions in a meeting, situations where nerves can take over and words simply refuse to come out. You might describe someone this way by saying, "He clammed up when they asked him about his past," suggesting the question caught him off guard and he shut down rather than answer. Or, "Whenever she's asked a difficult question during a presentation, she clams up," painting a picture of someone whose confidence disappears under pressure. It's a phrase that captures something almost physical, like a shell closing shut, which is actually where the imagery comes from. From silence, let's swing to the complete opposite: speaking out. This phrase means expressing an opinion openly and without fear, especially when the topic is serious, controversial, or important. It's not about casual chatter, it's about courage, about standing up and saying what needs to be said even when it might be unpopular or risky. You might hear, "She decided to speak out against the government's unfair policy," describing someone willing to challenge authority publicly. Or simply, "He's not afraid to speak out when he disagrees," highlighting a person's willingness to voice dissent rather than stay quiet to avoid conflict. In short, this phrase is about refusing to stay silent when silence would be easier. Notice how these four phrases move across a real emotional spectrum, from the discomfort of being talked down to, through the everyday act of bringing up a new idea, to the anxious silence of clamming up, and finally to the boldness of speaking out. Together, they show just how much nuance English packs into these small combinations of words. They're not just vocabulary to memorize, they're tools for describing real social dynamics: confidence, courage, nervousness, respect, and its absence. And there's still more ground to cover, because the next set of phrasal verbs deals with something we've all experienced: the words that slip out before we mean them to. And the moments when someone talks just a little too much. That's exactly where we're headed next. Part 3, Orchestrated Final Section, covering multiple phrasal verbs. Orchestrated Final Section, covering multiple phrasal verbs. Here's Part 3, the final installment. Wrapping up the lesson exactly where we left off. Let's start with one of the most relatable phrases on this list: blurt out. This describes the moment when words escape your mouth before your brain has fully approved them. Something said suddenly without thinking, often something you immediately wish you could take back. We've all had that experience of speaking too quickly and regretting it a second later. You might hear, "She blurted out her feelings in the middle of the conversation," describing someone whose emotions got the better of their filter. Or, "He blurted out the secret before he could stop himself," capturing that classic moment where a piece of information slips out despite every intention to keep it hidden. This phrase captures spontaneity at its most: unguarded speech that bypasses careful thought entirely. From sudden outbursts, let's move to the opposite problem, talking too much for too long. That's exactly what run on describes, continuing to speak about something, often something fairly unimportant, well past the point where the listener's interest has faded. It's that friend who just won't stop talking, or the speaker who loses track of time because they're too absorbed in their own story. You might say, "I hope I'm not running on too much, let me know if I am," which is actually a polite way of checking whether you've overstayed your welcome in a conversation. Or consider, "He tends to run on about his girlfriend for hours," painting a picture of someone who talks endlessly on a favorite subject, oblivious to whether anyone else is still interested. It's a gentle way of pointing out when enthusiasm turns into rambling. Now for the final phrase in today's lesson, pipe up. This describes speaking up suddenly and somewhat unexpectedly, often breaking a silence or jumping into a conversation you weren't originally part of. It usually carries a hint of surprise. Nobody quite expected this person to say something, and then they did. Picture a quiet room where nobody said a word, until nobody said anything until he piped up and asked a question, suddenly breaking the silence with something worth hearing. Or imagine a large meeting where most people stay quiet except for one person. He piped up from the back of the room with an unexpected comment, someone speaking up from an unlikely spot, catching everyone slightly off guard. It's a phrase that captures that small jolt of surprise when someone unexpectedly finds their voice. And with that, we've covered every phrasal verb on today's list, from the confidence of speaking up, through the rudeness of butting in, the discomfort of being talked down to, the courage required to speak out, all the way to the unfiltered honesty of blurting out and the surprise of piping up. Together, these phrases paint a detailed picture of how English speakers describe the countless ways we communicate, sometimes clearly, sometimes clumsily, sometimes bravely, and sometimes without meaning to say anything at all. Phrasal verbs like these can feel tricky at first, especially since so many of them share similar structures but carry completely different meanings depending on context. But the more you use them, the more naturally they'll settle into your everyday speech, until they stop feeling like vocabulary you memorized and start feeling like language you simply know. If this lesson helped clear things up for you, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who's working on their English, and subscribe for more lessons like this one. I'll see you soon with another video. Until then, keep learning, keep practicing, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.